Italian unification, this, according to me and other historians, they suggest or they believe that the Italian unification was a struggle by the Italians, okay, to unify their states and free them from domination, foreign domination. You must understand that most of the Italian states before the unification, which was predominantly from 1815 up to 1870, before that period, most of those states were under what we call foreign rule, under Austrian rule, or others were even under France. So example of those states, these included the northern states such as Piedmont, Sardinia, southern states such as Naples, Sicily, okay, which were under Austrian rule, okay, Nice and Savoy under French domination. So the Italians, okay, were scattered. So different Italian populations had been scattered. However, right from 1815, so some Italian nationalists later started spreading awareness, spreading nationalism, wanting to unify the Italians and those states and put them under one state. So the struggle for the struggle for unifying those states and freeing them from foreign domination from those powerful states such as Austria or France, this is referred to as the Italian unification. You must understand that between the period of 1815 up to 1848, these folks, the Italians, faced several obstacles. So the attempts to unify their states, okay, the attempts to unify Italy were futile. In other words, they were a failure. However, after 1848, they started achieving remarkable success. So the Italian unification, as rumors have it, it's likely to appear in November 2025, paper 210/3. So the Italian unification is likely to appear. So the Italian unification, what do we usually cover? The first topic is the obstacles or the challenges or the barriers for Italy's unification. Okay, for example, a question can appear like examine the problems the Italians or Italy faced, okay, during her unification or during the struggle for her unification. Or they can ask you like a two-sided question: to what extent was the Metternich system, or to what extent did the Metternich system hinder Italian unification? So this is very interesting. So obstacles, that's one of the sections. So here your students or candidates have to be smart, okay? Sometimes they may ask you like, to what extent was, let's say, Austria, okay, responsible for the delay, okay, of Italy's unification? Here you look at Austria, the role of Austria as a country, okay, particularly the policies of Metternich, but you phrase them in relationship with Austria. Then you look at other countries. But however, if they ask you to what extent was Metternich system responsible for the delay of Italy's unification, or to what extent was Metternich responsible for the delay of the Metternich system, okay, his system, here you look at the role played by his system and other factors. Then also they may ask you, to what extent was Metternich responsible? Here you look at the role of Metternich, okay, and other personalities, okay. Their personalities who contributed positively and negatively. So Metternich is he was largely negative. Okay, you look at the role of Metternich, then you look at other personalities, Louis Napoleon III, then you look at other personalities who played also positive role, such as Giuseppe Garibaldi, Giuseppe Mazzini, people such as Orsini the Martyr, people like Count Camillo Cavour. Also you look at another person such as Napoleon Bonaparte, indirectly how he contributed. So students have to be aware that examiners are tricky, and students have to be careful not to misfire. Another section under obstacles, they may ask you like a country, for example, to what extent was Austria responsible for the delay? So you look at Austria as a country, then other countries. So that is one branch that is covered. Another branch is the role of different personalities. You know, as a struggle, there are people who lead others, okay? A struggle does not just happen out of the blue. There must be people who lead others, who inspire, who motivate others. So here, a candidate is expected to understand the different Italian nationalists, such as Giuseppe Mazzini, such as Giuseppe Garibaldi, people like Count Camillo Cavour, people like Orsini the Martyr, then later other leaders such as Louis Napoleon III, then also other personalities such as Giacomo Leopardi, who wrote his book. So different philosophers and all of those, okay? So those people, the nationalists, a candidate is supposed to fully understand their role, okay? Then from there, we also look at also other countries, their different roles, the roles they played. Countries such as Prussia, the role it played. Countries like Austria, the role it played. Countries like France, the role it played, okay? So several countries. After, we have also to look at another branch. It's known as reasons why the Italian unification was a success or was successful after 1848. So it must be noted that when we were beginning this introduction, we had analyzed that between 1815 up to around 1848, the Italians faced several bottlenecks or problems or hindrances or obstacles to unify their states, okay, or to free their states from foreign domination, okay. However, from 1848 onwards, they started achieving a remarkable success, okay. So also a student is expected to understand like the factors that favored Italy's unification, okay. Then from there, we look at also reasons why Italy unification was successful. Then also, examiners may be tricky and they ask students questions such as another question like compare the unification of Italy and unification of Germany. So also they can try to trick students asking them that. So when they trick students asking them, here they are expected to give the similarities between Italian unification and also German unification. Then on the other side, they look at the differences, okay? So if a student understands Italy's unification, then he or she, to be on a safer side, or a candidate must also understand German unification. So now let us start with the obstacles or the general obstacles. If such a question is to come, a student is supposed to be happy and excited and even smile and know that those are full 25 marks because it's an easy question. So if you ask like the obstacles, okay, The first obstacle is known as the Metternich system. So this was one of the biggest obstacles. So what was the Metternich system? The Metternich system, this was a policy by an Austrian emperor by the names of Clemens von Metternich. Clemens von Metternich was an aristocrat, a member of the Habsburg family in Austria, who was greatly against what we call nationalism, who was greatly against what we call revolutionary ideas, okay, of nationalism, liberty, equality, fraternity. So Metternich, he himself made sure that he came up with policies that hindered the unification, as he referred the revolutions and the unification as a cancer that must be treated, or as a monster that has opened its jaws, and those jaws must be plucked, the teeth must be plucked out. So his policies greatly hindered what we call the spread of nationalism, which would increase awareness amongst the Italians. So here we are going to look at several aspects of the Metternich system. So during our time, I recall, we used to write essays to show the examiner that we are not a joking subject, like in Golola's words, a joking subject. So like if they would ask like Metternich system, in a paragraph we would ensure that we put like 10 lines, okay? But nowadays things have become smoother and easier. Students write at least like 8-10 lines, okay, or for an essay. But back in our days, so to improve or to impress that we are not a joking subject, we'll put like 20 lines. But however, you can still do that to show that you really understand the concept, because European history is based on impression. It's not about the number of points that you are expected to write, it's about the quality, it's about the gist of the matter. Okay, so here you see Metternich system, okay? We are going to give several aspects. We are going to enrich our essay, okay, of how he hindered. Number one, Metternich system. And so under the Metternich system, we have to note that in 1819, Metternich passed what we call the Carlsbad Decrees, okay? So the Carlsbad Decrees, these were passed by Metternich. A decree is a law, so they were passed by Metternich after an Austrian aristocrat by the names of Kotzebue had been assassinated. So what happened? He was assassinated, so he ensured that nationalism, a holding of debates, nationalism demonstrations were banned, okay? So by passing that, so this led to what we call strict censorship, okay? By passing those Carlsbad decrees, so they were limited spread of nationalistic ideas or debates amongst the people, okay, amongst the Italians, thus leaving Italians ignorant about the benefits of them being united and unified, hence an obstacle to the what we call Italian unification. Furthermore, Metternich had a strict spy network. So Metternich had a strict spy network. In dictatorial regimes, what happens is that dictators are usually scared, okay, about their opponents. So they pass what we call those spy networks. So there was massive surveillance. Amongst the Italian nationalists, such as the Carbonaris, and those nationalists such as Mazzini, and all the rest of the Italians who wanted to support what we call the Italian unification. So Metternich's spy network was so strict that one Italian lady cried out that my daughter cannot sneeze, Metternich will hear of it. So I strongly recommend, if you're writing such a point, okay, you put that quote, okay? So those, I call them spices. So you spice up your essay, make the essay interesting. Zanya kawowo, kuba kawowo, because everybody likes that style. Play either Luis Enrique PSG style. Don't play boring, okay, stuff for writing essays which are plain. So you can add those quotes, add those examples, so those will improve or will increase on the impression of the examiner. So one Italian lady cried out, my daughter cannot sneeze, Metternich will hear of it, okay? Because of such, even because of a strict spy network, the Italians even feared to join some nationalistic movements. So they feared to join like the Carbonari. So what was the Carbonari? Let me explain the Carbonari. The Carbonari, this was a movement, okay, by the highly educated Italians who would be in the bushes burning charcoal. Meanwhile, they would be talking about nationalism, okay? So some Italians feared to join those movements, the Carbonari, and also other movements such as the Young Italian movement, because of they were afraid, okay, of that spy network. If you would be caught, you would face serious repercussions, okay? So this greatly hindered the Italian unification. No wonder after 1840, it was not. No wonder it was not after the downfall of Metternich in February 1848, the Vienna or Austrian Revolution, that the Italian unification was a success. So, also furthermore, the Metternich system, how did it hinder what we call, how did it hinder the Italian unification? So, the Metternich system, okay, Metternich restored or installed what we call puppets, okay, installed what we call the despotic leaders or puppets, okay. So here, for example, in Piedmont, he restored Victor Emmanuel, okay, Victor Emmanuel the first and later the second. So by restoring those puppets, okay, these ones ensured that they restricted nationalism. Then Ferdinand the First also was restored in Naples and Sicily. So these ones were, in my own words, yes men. In other words, they were puppets to Metternich, okay? So these were the dictators who greatly restricted what we call nationalism, okay, amongst the Italians, okay? They exercised oppression, and this explains why there were even the 1823, 1830, and later 1848 Italian revolts, okay? So the Metternich system, for which it was there to hinder the Italians, so by installing those puppets who danced to the tunes of Metternich, who accepted all Metternich's policies of banning freedom, suppressing revolts, suppressing demonstrations. So this greatly did Italians what we call an injustice towards their success in attaining their unification. So then furthermore, the Metternich system, how did it also hinder what we call the Italian unification? Metternich built a strong army. So a strong army, this army was brutal. It was aimed at suppressing demonstration, shoot to kill, no negotiations. So the army was led by a general known as General Windic Gratis, who was one of the brutal generals who was fundamental in suppressing most of the nationalistic uprisings of what we call the Italians. So for example, the 1823, 1830 revolts were suppressed by that man, General Windic Gratis. Then also the 1848. So this explains why most of those uprisings by the Italians to achieve their independence were actually a failure. okay? Because, so that system of Metternich, he made sure that the army is fully equipped to handle the so-called enemies, of the Austrian Empire. So the enemies of the Austrian Empire were those people who were advocating for unification of Italy. So by building a strong army, this greatly hindered Italian unification. Then also the Metternich agreed to hold what we call the Vienna, the Congress of Vienna, which was the Vienna Settlement, and later other concerts. So these concerts, such as the concerts or Congress system. So by holding the Vienna, if you to look at the terms, okay, of Vienna, like for example the Vienna Settlement, this was aimed at ensuring that there shouldn't be any spread of revolutions or revolutionary ideas, and there shouldn't be any rise of any person like Napoleon who had tried to preach or spread ideas of nationalism amongst the Italians or amongst the people. So Metternich agreed to hold the Vienna Settlement, which led to the birth of the Congress system. So the terms or what was discussed was too unfair, too unrealistic for the nationalists. Number one, ensuring that Bourbons, restored monarchs must be restored. So the leaders who had been overthrown, let's say by Napoleon Bonaparte, during the era of Napoleon between 1799 to 1815, have to be restored. So for example, it must be understood that during that regime of Napoleon, he had put his brothers and sisters to lead those states. So what happened? So these other leaders, aristocratic leaders, autocratic leaders, had been overthrown. So the Metternich system, through the Vienna Settlement, agreed that those autocratic, despotic rulers who were against nationalism, which would favor Italian unification, was actually hindered, okay? Was really hindered. So it must be understood that by restoring those Bourbons, okay, under the Vienna Settlement, the Vienna Settlement, people such as Ferdinand VII of Spain, Ferdinand I of Naples, Sicily, people like Victor Emmanuel I and later the second, okay, of Piedmont, Sardinia, these autocratic leaders ensured that they hindered unification, hindered spread of nationalism. So it must be understood that the different meetings, or the different meetings, such as the 1818 Aix-la-Chapelle Congress, okay, they agreed on restoring Louis XVIII and the other Italian leaders. Then the 1820 Laibach, 1821 Troppau Congress, this was to suppress the activities of the Carbonari. So all these, okay, these meetings, okay, were done, okay, with plans of how to suppress the revolutions, how to suppress the nationalists who would be fundamental and instrumental in the attainment of Italy's unification. So Metternich system was partly responsible for the holding of what we call those meetings, okay, hence an obstacle. Then furthermore, you can see that the Metternich system, okay, how it hindered. Metternich made sure that he turned Austria into what we call a center of diplomacy. So by ensuring that by turning Austria into a center of diplomacy, this came to be known as the Metternich era. So how did this hinder Italy's unification? By turning Austria as a center of diplomacy, this discouraged liberal countries such as Britain to assist the revolutionaries in Italy to do what? To rise up. So these so countries like Britain, who were under what we call a constitutional monarch, and which were liberal, which were liberal and supporting democracy and all democracy, and which were liberal, they couldn't do that. Okay, so Metternich had managed to ensure that he had turned Vienna into what? A center of diplomacy. So this came to be known as the Metternich era. So he had successfully convinced those other powers, okay, not to intervene in what? In the affairs of the Italians, and in the affairs of what? In the affairs of the Italians, to help the nationalists who are being oppressed to attain their unification or get free from domination. This explains the reasons why people like George Canning and later other people like Palmerston could not be able to, Britain could not interfere. It was not after 1848 that other leaders were successful in trying to help the Italians in attaining what? Their unification. But the Metternich system, under Metternich, he made sure that he turned Austria into what we call a center of diplomacy. So this made it hard for countries like Britain to get involved in what we call Austria's affairs or Italy's affairs. So a student can keep on building on. So with Metternich, what he did, which greatly hindered, okay? Then also you see that Metternich system suppressed revolutions, okay? So suppressed the earlier revolutions. So what revolutions had been suppressed? For example, the 1823 Carbonari uprising was suppressed. The 1830 revolutions in Italy were suppressed. And because of such revolutions being suppressed by Metternich, this discouraged, okay, the Italians. Bagwira muddala amaanyi ne bagamba amaanyi gatuwedde okugwamu gas, okay? So they were discouraged, okay? So some Italians gave up on the struggle, and this somehow limited the Italian unification, or hindered Italian unification. So you can keep on building points and points, okay? Then also banned the publishing of nationalistic books, okay? Which would awaken the minds, of the Italians. So by banning the publication of those books, this actually made the Italians, in my own words, I say ignorant, not aware of nationalism. They were totally ignorant, hence an obstacle. Then also is also demonstrations, meetings at universities were banned, okay? So people were what? Banned. Then also, how did the Metternich system hinder? Metternich ensured that Italy, most of the Italian states were impoverished and rural, okay? So they were impoverished and rural. So by being impoverished, okay, so the Italians saw no means, okay, first of all, so by being impoverished and rural, so there wasn't proper communication. The road network, okay, wasn't proper, okay. So here nationalists could not easily move from, let's say, urban centers such as Rome to move to rural, let's say, Piedmont, to rural Naples, okay, to preach and spread nationalism and what? Liberty. So what happened is he made sure that the Italians were in other words backward or uncivilized, and they never had proper infrastructure, okay? So this made it very hard for them to do what? To be able to attain their unification. Furthermore, also poverty, okay? He made sure that the Italians were impoverished. So by being impoverished, they couldn't take their children to to universities or to schools and become aware. You know, education, it is a source of what? Enlightenment. Education promotes enlightenment. Education promotes awareness. So if somebody is illiterate, automatically he's ignorant. So Metternich deliberately made Italians illiterate, okay, by ensuring that there were no schools and poor, okay, so they couldn't afford the money to take their children to University of Rome, or so this explains why there were very few elites, such as Giuseppe Mazzini and whatever. But most of, over 80% of the Italians were totally ignorant and illiterate. So you keep on building from there. Okay, so that's Metternich system. So on the other side, there are other factors.